on, and you're live.
Good morning, Summa scholars. Welcome to the Daily Summa. Today is May the 23rd, during the season of Eastertide. Welcome to the Daily Summa. Good morning, Joe.
Morning.
How you doing?
Pretty good. Tired.
Yeah. We were up till 2:30.
Very good thing I left when I did.
We went over to
Very
Harrison's
good thing.
porch, and the whole crowd followed.
Wow.
I mean, like, people we don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So, and then I've set my alarm for 4:30, but today I got up at 5:30. But it was a beautiful night, a fellowship and merrymaking with John Rice present, which was wonderful, and many more things I could tell you. But let's dive into the Daily Summa.
Poppy's here.
Good morning, Poppy. Thank you for sharing your porch with us last night. Let's just dive in and maybe we can chat later. What do you think, Joe? Give that a whirl.
Yeah, give that a whirl.
We're going straight into Article 4 of Question 18. And the article is whether all things are life in God. Are they, though? Because he said previously that things that don't preambulate, move around, are not living. So how can all things be life in God? That's what we need to discover today. As we take this journey on this beaver galleon with St. Thomas, sailing off bright and early here Friday morning. Tomorrow is 9 o'clock, wake up. Well, 9 o'clock, that's going to be sweet. It's always sweet when Saturday and feast days roll around.
Yeah.
And then Sunday, no wakey uppy in the morning, sleepy lady. I hope your kids let you do that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Yesterday we read Objection 2 from Larry, and we'll be revisiting that on his reply to Objection 1. So we'll be getting to that on the reply to Objection 1, but let's now go and read Objection 2 from Ralph, because these guys seem to think that not all things are life in God. Objection 2 from Ralph. Further, all things are in God as their first model, but things modeled ought to conform to the model. Since then, not all things have life in themselves, it seems that not all things are life in God. Okay, Ralph is really mixed up right here, I think. But we're going to see Thomas's sweet answer when we get to the reply. Objection 3 from Shimon. Further, as Augustine says, a living substance is better than a substance that does not live. If, therefore, things which in themselves have not life are life in God, it seems that things exist more truly in God than in themselves. But this appears to be false, since in themselves they exist actually, but in God potentially. We're borrowing from earlier questions and answers where he talked about things that God brings into existence and things that he does not bring into existence, or things that are not yet perfected, so they're in potentiality to move into the perfection of being a fully grown horse or whatever they are. We'll see how Thomas handles that in a minute. Objection 4 from Reuven. Further, just as good things and things made in time are known by God, so are bad things and things that God can make, but that never will be made. If therefore all things are life in God, inasmuch as known by him, it seems that even bad things and things that will never be made are life in God, as known by him, and this appears to be inadmissible. This is inadmissible. All right. On the contrary, it is said, what was made in him was life. Why is that comma there? What was made in him was life. Okay. But all things were made except God. Therefore, all things are life in God. Let's listen to the philosophical reply, which is very short. Respondio. In God, to live is to understand. as before stated. In God, intellect, the thing understood, and the act of understanding are one and the same. Hence, whatever is in God as understood is the very living or life of God. Now, wherefore, since all things that have been made by God are in him as things understood, it follows that all things in him are the divine life itself. Now, that's some deeply mystical stuff. All things, rocks, stones, are life in God. Now, I think that can be explained or understood. It can never fully be understood, but at least in this life, perhaps. But I think it could understood with my metaphor that I'm wanting to present about gaming and also about mind, which I will be putting in the novel that I'm writing. And sadly, we can't do it here. But this is just a flyover, guys. We're not going super deep, and we're certainly not trying to answer age-old questions with new ideas. We're just going on a flyover of St. Thomas and hearing what he has to say today on this rather short page, which is nice because we started a wee bit late, and I would like to get to Mass. It was kind of nice yesterday to zip on over to Mass.
7:38, so you have to rush this.
Ooh! Well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But what this makes me think of, though, all things are life in God. And I said stones. I said it on purpose because the Lord said God could raise up sons to Abraham even from these stones, which is a very powerful statement. I mean, because for there to be salvation for the human race, God had to enter into our genetic pool. That's like, I mean, he couldn't just come in from the outside. That's why we say there can't be that kind of salvation for angels, because each angel is an individually created being and doesn't have a genetic, is not one man, as St. Isaac of Stella says this morning in the vigils, if you did your vigil office this morning, that we are one man. Remember, this whole project is not complete, guys. God is creating Adam, man. And he created the first Adam, and then he brought the second Adam, Mashiach, Yeshua, Jesus. And we are all incorporated into that body as adopted sons and daughters, creating that final full man, which is Christ come to full stature, as it says in the scripture. Remember, Christ, Mashiach, has not come to full stature. That's why Paul can say we fill up in our own bodies that which is still lacking in the sufferings of Christ for his body, the church. There's still lack of suffering. The man is not complete. The head has led the charge, descended, entered into the gene pool, and then elevated it up in his ascension. Blessed be the Lord. But we are all awaiting the fullness. That's why you have a sense of life not being complete, that there's still something missing, because there is something missing. We have not, this project is not finished, and we're cooperating with the Lord for the full creation of man. Man is not fully created yet. So it's interesting that Jesus says that he can bring sons to Abraham from these stones. That's a whole other order of connection. So obviously, now that we know genetics, we can use this way of speaking and have more clarity, that he could take the stone and he could manipulate the numbers. I mean, it comes down to math, or as Hazal would say, the Kabbalist, it comes down to the Hebrew letters, which are numbers. Configuring those letters or numbers in the right way to create a son of Abraham. He would know what all the mathematics are behind each sperm that was not entered into an egg and created for each of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He would know all the potentialities, so he could just manipulate the subatomic particles of the stone and turn it into that genetic line, and it would be part of that still part of our humanity, which is a bit mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think in terms of the metaphor of computers, then we can see how it's just imminently possible if the person who's the programmer has control of the program. He just changes the numbers and the configuration, and then something else comes up on the screen. And this screen is what we're viewing and seeing right now, and he can change and move that. I don't know why then he doesn't just give me a bride from the stones in the street. He could do it.
Maybe you're not as cool as Abraham.
It's probably true. Yeah, probably true.
Sorry to break it to you, dude.
It's a rough one this early in the morning. Reply to objection 1. Creatures are said to be in God in twofold sense. In one way, so far are they. In one way, so far are held together. So far as they are, is probably what it meant to say. I think that's a little typo. What does yours say?
Same thing.
Okay. In one way, so far as they are held together and preserved by the divine power, even as we say that things that are in our power are in us. Things that are in our power are in us. It's kind of beautiful. Things that are in God's power are in him, and we are in his power. Although he relinquishes his power so that we might have free will and then choose, because love can only happen through a choice of the heart. And creatures are thus said to be in God, even as they exist in their own natures. In this sense, we must understand the words of the apostle when he says, in him we live, move, and have our being or be. Since our being, living, and moving are themselves caused by God. In another sense, things are said to be in God, as in him who knows them, in which sense they are in God through their proper ideas, which in God are not distinct from the divine essence. Hence, things as they are in God are the divine essence. That's very Kabbalistic. That we are shards of God, or what's the word they use? We are sparks, divine sparks coming out from the divine essence, and that we are actually, what the Kabbalists love to say is, there is nothing besides him. But you have to make distinctions in order that you don't get into either pantheism or, I can't remember what the other heresy is. Too early in the morning. And since the divine essence is life and not movement, it follows that things existing in God in this manner are not movement, but life. Remember, we toggle back and forth between divine and human perspectives, and that's what Larry and Ralph and the boys do not get. That's why this first objection yesterday, it seems that not all things are life in God, for it is said, in him we move and live and have our being. Not all things in God are movement, therefore not all things are life in him. Yes, not all things in God are movement. There is no movement in God. He is pure act. But we have movement, but we have movement from our perspective. In God and from his perspective, there is not movement. He knows the end from the beginning. And all this is one, which makes sense if you consider it in the metaphor I'm going to use in my novel, that everything is mind. And I think Dr. Steve Meyer has some interesting things to say about that. Reply to objection 2. The thing modeled must be like the model according to the form, not the mode of being. For sometimes the form has being of another kind in the model from that which it has in the thing modeled. Thus, the form of a house has in the mind of the architect immaterial and intangible being, but in the house that exists outside his mind, material and sensible being. I think we can all understand that. Hence, the ideas of things, though not existing in themselves, are life in the divine mind, as having a divine existence in that mind. The house in Asian's mind that he has not yet built is still in him, and he is a living being. It is living in him. Reply to objection 3. If form only and not matter belonged to natural things, then in all respects, natural things would exist more truly in the divine mind, by the ideas of them than in themselves. Turning to the page sponsored by craigkinsey.locals.com. Go to craigkinsey.locals.com and sign up, become part of our big, beautiful family. And I just realized that I haven't been doing those locals videos. Maybe we'll do one today or something. We'll see. All right. We won't do any banter because I want to get to mass. How are we doing on time?
7:47.
Big plane. For which reason, in fact, Plato held that the separate man was the true man, and that man, as he exists in matter, is man only by participation. But since matter enters into the being of natural things, we must say that those things have simply being in the divine mind more truly than in themselves, because in that mind they have an uncreated being, but in themselves a created being. This is all very deep. I mean, this could really just go on. You could do a whole book on this. I'm going to offer up my learning today for our friend Andrew Doty, who's on pilgrimage. I saw him leave this morning.
Excuse me.
We broke silence in a whisper to hug and say goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pray for you.
Good.
It's beautiful. Okay. Whereas this particular being, a man or horse, for example, has this being more truly in its own nature than in the divine mind, because it belongs to human nature to be material, which, as existing in the divine mind, it is not. Ooh, that's getting just so... I want to say complex, but complex is not the right word. I just like the word mystical.
Deep, bro.
It's deep, dude. You hear that?
Yeah.
Brakes?
Some kind of brakes or a saw or tool or something.
Yeah. Even so, a horse has nobler being in the architect's mind than in matter. Oh, house. I was about to say, why would we turn? Even so, a house has nobler being in the architect's mind than in matter. Yet, a material house is called a house more truly than the one which exists in the mind, since the former is actual, the latter only potential. I like how he says nobler. Makes me think about my creative stuff. There's a tendency to just want to keep your creation noble and not let it be sullied by entering into Malchus in the material world, where it can be muddled and misunderstood, and keep it noble. All right, want to get to mass. Reply to objection 4. Although bad things are in God's knowledge, as being comprised under that knowledge, yet they are not in God as created by him or preserved by him or as having their type in him. They are known by God through the types of good things. The hole in the paper. He knows all the potential holes in the paper. Hence, it cannot be said that bad things are life in God. Those things that are not in time may be called life in God, insofar as life means understanding only, and inasmuch as they are understood by God, but not insofar as life implies a principle of operation. Principle of operation is the movement thing, how things are operating in the material world. So let's see if we can sum this up. In God is the essence of all things. He is ipsum esse, being itself. To understand in him is one. But from our perspective, we are seeing movement and change and things coming into perfection from potentiality. So in that sense, we have things that we call life or not life. We classify things in that way, and it's right and proper to do so from our perspective. But from the divine perspective, he's seeing this refulgence of life. He's even seeing the potential sons of Abraham in the stones. Crazy. But for him, all things are life. And we are, as I like to say, the breadcrumbs, the things in this earth, the things of this earth, which is the name of my novel, the things of this earth are semiotic representations of the divine life that we are graced to have if we want to trace the breadcrumbs back to our Father, back to our Creator, and then be deiformed soul, transformed in him, which is possible through meditating on this straw and the things of God in scriptures, and then prayerfully meditating on them in silence, and practicing virtue. So go do thou likewise. And I'm going to go to Mass. That's it.
Okay.